The day started like any other on my ranch. The smell of fresh hay, cattle grazing by the fence line, and the hum of cicadas in the warm morning air. Then came the sound of tires crunching up my gravel driveway. A man in a crisp polo shirt stepped out, holding a glossy envelope. "Official HOA business," he muttered as he handed it to me. Inside was a letter that nearly made me drop my coffee. Notice of violation. Total fines due, $250,000. My offenses? My barn wasn't painted an approved color. My livestock exceeded neighborhood noise standards. My fencing didn't align with HOA guidelines. I read it twice, then laughed bitterly. My ranch wasn't even in their subdivision. The nearest HOA house was half a mile away. Still, my chest tightened. This wasn't a mistake. It was a land grab. And I already knew the name behind it. Karen. The very next morning, I heard the rumble of an SUV pulling up fast. Dust swirled as a black Lexus screeched to a stop. Out stepped Karen, sharp suit, sunglasses, and a smirk that could curdle milk. 2 HOA board members followed her, clutching clipboards like shields. Karen strutted up my porch like she owned it. "Mr. Rancher," she announced, loud enough for my ranch hands to hear, "you are in severe violation of HOA codes. Either pay the $250,000 fine or face foreclosure proceedings." I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations," I said evenly. "It's not under your HOA." Karen tilted her head, smug. "That's where you're wrong. Our community bylaws extend to surrounding properties that affect our aesthetic. And your farm animals? They're an eyesore." The board members chuckled under their breath. I stepped closer, voice low but firm. "You're making a mistake, Karen." She smirked wider. "We'll see who's making a mistake." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the old oak desk in my study, surrounded by boxes of my grandfather's documents. The ticking clock was the only sound as I pored over yellowed deeds and brittle maps. The more I read, the stranger it got. The HOA was citing bylaws that had no legal connection to my property. But something in my grandfather's files caught my eye, a reference to adjoining parcels and easements that stretched far beyond the ranch fence lines. I traced the map with my finger, heart pounding. The adjoining parcels overlapped perfectly with the modern-day subdivision Karen ruled over. I whispered to myself, could it be? Hours later, my hands trembling, I unfolded one last document, my grandfather's original deed from the 1950s. Buried halfway down the page, in tight legal script, was the line that changed everything. Ownership. Of the primary ranch estate includes perpetual rights to all adjoining parcels, developments, and easements tied to the original water system. I blinked, reading it again. All adjoining parcels. I pulled out a surveyor's map. The subdivision the HOA bragged about, with its manicured lawns and cookie-cutter homes, was built entirely on what once were my family's adjoining parcels. The truth hit me like a thunderclap. I didn't just own the ranch. I owned the land beneath the entire HOA neighborhood. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse, my truck rattling down Main Street. Inside, the records office smelled of dust and ink. A clerk with glasses perched on her nose frowned as she examined the papers. She flipped through the deeds, cross-checking against county plats. Finally, she looked up, eyes wide. "Sir, this deed is still valid, which means legally you don't just own your ranch. You own the soil underneath all 87 homes in that HOA development." Her words echoed in the quiet room. My jaw clenched, not from anger, but from exhilaration. Karen thought she had trapped me with a $250,000 fine. But in truth, her entire empire sat on my land. I didn't rush to confront them. That would have been too easy. Instead, I let Karen's arrogance grow. Every week, new violation letters arrived. Unapproved livestock, unauthorized fencing, failure to landscape according to HOA guidelines. Each one went into a neat folder labeled evidence. Meanwhile, I met quietly with my lawyer, who nearly laughed out loud when he saw the deeds. "They're harassing the actual landlord," he said. "This will be fun." So I waited, calm, patient, while Karen tightened the noose around her own neck. Finally, a certified letter arrived. Mandatory compliance hearing. Attendance required. The HOA wanted me at their clubhouse. Perfect. When I walked in, the room went quiet. The board sat at a long polished table, smug smiles plastered on their faces. Karen sat at the center like a queen, gavel in hand. "Mr. Rancher," she said sweetly, "are you ready to settle your $250,000 debt today?" The board members chuckled, pens ready to sign foreclosure papers. I dropped a thick folder onto the table with a heavy thud. "Actually," I said, my voice echoing in the room, "I came to settle your debt." The board leaned forward as I spread out the old deeds and maps across the glossy oak surface. The county seal glistened under the fluorescent lights. "This ranch was established long before your subdivision, and according to these deeds," I said, tapping the clause with my finger, "every lot in this neighborhood sits on my land. Every road, every fence, every mailbox. Mine." Karen's smirk faltered. "You're bluffing," she whispered, voice shaky. The clerk from the records office, who I'd invited as a witness, cleared her throat. "He's not bluffing. The county recognizes his ownership." The room went silent. Board members exchanged panicked looks. Karen's face drained of color as the reality sank in. She had fined the wrong man, and she had just declared war on her landlord. Karen sat frozen, gripping her gavel like it could save her sinking ship. But after a moment, she forced a laugh, high-pitched and fake. "This is absurd," she said, waving a manicured hand. "Even if that deed is real, you can't possibly enforce it. Our HOA governs this neighborhood, not some farmer with dusty paperwork." I leaned back in my chair, calm as a still pond. "Karen, the law doesn't care about your bylaws. The ground under your fancy houses belongs to me. That means every HOA meeting, every fine you issue, is being conducted on my property." The board members shifted uncomfortably. One even whispered, "Is this true?" under his breath. Karen's smile wavered, but she slammed the gavel. "We will fight this. You'll see." Over the next week, the balance of power began to tilt. Neighbors whispered in their driveways. Some even knocked on my ranch gate, nervously asking, "Is it true? Do you really own the land?" I didn't answer directly. I didn't have to. I just let word spread. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down, sending out HOA newsletters in bold letters. "Ignore the false claims of ownership. The HOA is in full control." But fear had already taken root. Homeowners realized the fines Karen had been slapping them with might be worthless, and that shook her throne. It didn't take long before Karen dragged me to court, trying to have my deed declared invalid. The courtroom was packed, homeowners in the gallery, journalists scribbling notes, HOA board members whispering nervously. Karen strutted to the stand, armed with binders and self-righteous fury. "This man is trying to steal our neighborhood," she declared. My lawyer calmly approached the bench and laid out the original deed, certified by the county clerk. The judge examined it carefully. "Ms. Karen," the judge said, voice stern, "this document predates your HOA by over 50 years. Legally, his claim stands." Karen's jaw dropped. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and just like that, her kingdom began to crumble. Back at the neighborhood, chaos erupted. Homeowners crowded into emergency HOA meetings, shouting over each other. Some demanded refunds for years of illegitimate fines. Others threatened lawsuits against the board. One man stood up and yelled, "If the land belongs to him, then Karen's been stealing from us this whole time." The board tried to calm the storm, but no one was listening anymore. People turned on Karen the same way wolves turn on a wounded leader. She had built her empire on intimidation. But without ground to stand on, literally, it was collapsing. I didn't want innocent families caught in the crossfire. So I made a decision. I called a meeting at the ranch. Homeowners shuffled in, wary but curious. Karen was banned at the gate. I stood before them and said, "I have no intention of uprooting your homes. My fight was never with you. It was with the HOA that exploited you." Gasps echoed. Some even clapped. "But," I continued, "if you want to stay here, it'll be under fair rules. No more bogus fines. No more harassment. I'll lease the land to you directly, at a fraction of what Karen bled from you." Relief spread across the room like a fresh breeze. For the first time, they saw me not as an enemy, but as a savior. Of course, Karen wasn't done. One night, she stormed my ranch gate, shouting at the top of her lungs, "You think you've won? I am this neighborhood. You can't erase me." I walked out slowly, hands in my pockets. "Karen, you erased yourself. You overreached, you got greedy, and now you've lost everything." Her face twisted with rage. "I'll fight you until my last breath." I leaned in, voice low but sharp as a knife. "Then you'd better start holding it." "Because this fight is over," she screamed, but the sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind her. Turns out, she'd trespassed one time too many, and just like that, Karen was escorted away, not as a queen, but as a criminal. Weeks later, the neighborhood looked different. No more HOA patrols, no more angry letters taped to doors. Kids played freely, families repainted their homes however they liked, and peace returned. I sat on my porch at sunset, the old deed in my hand. My grandfather's words echoed in my memory. "This land will protect you if you protect it." Karen's empire had fallen. The HOA was dissolved. The neighbors now paid fair rent directly to me, grateful and free of tyranny. And me? I didn't just save my ranch. I reclaimed everything she tried to take, with interest. The HOA fined me $250,000 for violations on my land. But in the end, I owned their entire neighborhood.